You're listening to the Youth for Life podcast with Michelle Baum, Director of Y for Life at Lutherans for Life, where we prepare youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording of our Chats for Life program to find out how you can be live too on our next Youth for Life podcast. Let's go ahead and have Kari introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her, and then we'll get started with our prayer.
So my name is Kari Smith, and I live in Davenport. I actually was born and raised in Minnesota, and then I went to Concordia, Nebraska, which we didn't call it Nebraska, but it was just Concordia Seward. Right. I was an education major, took my first call to teach at Trinity in Davenport, and I was going to live in Iowa for 2 years, but I've never left. So it's now 20 years later, but I quit teaching when I had children and then went back, got my master's degree, and now I work for Lutheran Family Service, which we're licensed in Iowa, Nebraska, and Illinois, and I do adoption work. And I also do guest speaking like this kind of all across the state of Iowa right now. So because of COVID, I really haven't traveled much, so I'm very excited to be here tonight. And dating is probably, or relationships are probably my favorite topic.
All right, well, let's go ahead and open with prayer. If you'll please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank and praise you for this night and for the opportunity to talk about relationships and about dating and about the gift of a person to love. We ask, Lord, that you be with us this evening, that we might learn a great deal from Kari, that we might be unified and uplifted in our pursuits of love and relationship building. And we ask, Lord, that you would give Kari the words to speak, that we might take away quite a bit of information, but also that she might glorify you. In your son's name we pray. Amen. Yeah. All right, so I have a first quick show of hands. How many of you have parents who have talked to you about dating? Okay, and how many of your parents have rules about dating? And how many of you have started dating? Some of you have. Okay, excellent. Okay, so then tell me what is, and this, I have only 2 more questions. Can you tell me one thing that you love about dating? What's wonderful about dating?
The ability to have interests you share and spend time together doing those things.
Awesome. What else is wonderful about dating?
I just really love people, so it's really nice to connect with someone. And also I love to find fun ways to show love to people, so it's fun to find enjoyment in it.
Okay, great.
It's nice to have an unconditional support system.
Excellent. Okay, so then on the other end of the spectrum, then what areas are most concerning to you about dating?
Well, obviously, having similar beliefs is extremely important. If you're not on the same page with things like that, you're going to find yourselves pretty much button heads along the way a lot of the time.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I agree with Micah. Definitely being equally yoked is super important, but it's also really hard being young because a lot of people, their faith is still developing. So it's hard to kind of figure out if you're equally yoked with someone.
Yeah. All right. So Ellie says ditto to everyone. And then Heidi says, I think it could be stressful because especially as Christians, we date intentionally with the hopes of potential marriage in the future. And we can get caught overthinking things like, is this person the one? Are they right for me? Okay. And Ellie was ditto to what Heidi said. Okay. All right. All right, well, thank you for kind of giving us some background on where you're coming from for dating. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kari and let her run with it.
All right. I'm a kind of a visual person, and I apologize already. I talk really fast. So if you need me to slow down and repeat, just kind of interrupt me. Or if you have questions, don't wait. Let's just have a dialogue going. But it's just exactly what Michelle just said. Dating should be intentional. And if you look at the screen, the very first words are till death do us part. That is in almost that words or close similar words are in every single marriage vow. Whether it's in a church, in a park, justice of the peace, till death do us part is a huge commitment. And it's very overwhelming to think you're making this big decision and already you may have met that person. You may not meet that person for a long, long time. So I have 4 goals tonight. Number 1, I want to discuss how do you build a healthy relationship. I want to talk about boundaries in dating, red flags, and then let's integrate it into our faith. So I already introduced myself, but that's my family. This picture is like 3 years old. Half my kids are taller than me. But I did go to Concordia Seward, go into Bulldogs, but like really all Concordias are great. And then I did get my master's in health education, which allowed me to really do adoption work, which also is a very big passion of mine. So moving forward here, the first question you need to ask yourself is, how well do we know each other? It's going to be the first critical step. When do you cross the line from a friendship to a dating? And what does dating look like today? Because it's not the same. Like when I was your age, I did not have a cell phone. I could not text somebody. If somebody called and wanted to talk to me, usually my mom answered the phone, and I had to run this really long cord to the bathroom to have any privacy. And so now to have this instant contact with people via text or social media, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever you're using is changing the game, okay? And it can be great, but it can also be very, very unhealthy. So we will get a little bit into social media. I don't want to get ahead of myself with that, but I always want you to ask yourself, do I really know who this person is? Because your phones are giving a lot of us a false identity. Because when I text somebody, I can read it 17 times. When I'm face to face with somebody, they see the true me. So you just have to think of the big picture. So the very first thing you have to know, there's 5 steps in building a healthy relationship. Okay. The very first one is know. So I would like people to chime in. How do you get to know somebody?
Spend time
with them first.
Okay, so I heard spend time with them. What else?
Be friends with them first.
Okay, friends. Okay. What else?
Meet their friends.
Meet their friends. It's a good one. All right, so I have some examples here. Number 1, this conversation. Face-to-face texting, you get to know a lot about somebody. You have to sit back and look at it from a big perspective though, okay? Because when we first start talking with somebody, we all put blinders on. We get this, what we call is like a tunnel vision. And so, because when you start dating somebody, you look through this tunnel and you can only see a very small glimpse. You don't have the ability to see the big picture. And this doesn't matter if you're 16, if you're 27, if you're 52. Every relationship has a blinder in the beginning, okay? And so you have to take things slow. Like if you've ever heard this, how long does it take a train to stop? From the moment they hit their brakes. It takes 1 mile. Okay, trains don't stop fast. And this is what I see in relationships a lot of times is people get going really, really fast. They get overwhelmed and all of a sudden it just crashes because they don't allow it to build something slow. And so knowing is such a critical step. You can't rush it. Someone's study habits. Study habits tell us a lot, okay? And I'm not saying being like book smart, street smart, whatever makes the difference, but you have to understand what you're compatible with. And knowing how they value can be a deal breaker for some people, okay? The third one is games. What does playing games with people teach you?
If they're competitive or not, or like how they deal with conflict.
That's absolutely right. How intense they get playing a game. You learn a lot about someone when you're doing something other than just talking, because you see your natural instincts. Can they lose? Okay. At what cost do they go to win a game? The music they listen to. This is kind of a big deal to me. To me, what you listen to portrays who you really are, some of your core of what you value, okay? It's one more piece to the puzzle. Okay, how someone drives. What do you learn from riding with somebody?
They have road rage or not.
Go ahead, Micah.
Sorry, I said if they have road rage or not, patience.
Absolutely, you can see a lot. And you're the first generation that you're not eager to drive. Why that is a whole different night of topic, but it is important for independence, okay, to be able to have freedom. So the last picture there is how you talk to your mom. What can you learn from how somebody talks to their parents?
If they're respectful or like respect authority.
Yeah, you know, and now there are some situations that are not good. And as you become closer friends with the person you're dating, you will understand their personal story. But this isn't a token thing of if they can be disrespectful to somebody else in front of you, they're going to be disrespectful to you at some point too. You have to learn to look at the big picture. So step 1 is knowing somebody, okay? Step 2 is trusting, okay? Trust only happens as you get to know somebody. Trust is mental. You can't see trust. Trust should be hard to build, but guess what? It's easy to shatter. Okay? It is hard. You cannot understand if you can trust somebody overnight. You should not feel like you can trust somebody on a first date. You have to give trust time. Okay? It's very, very important. The third one is relying. Relying on somebody is the action of trusting. So, what do they complain about? Who do you sit with at the dining hall or at lunch? When I did this for an older group of people, who's paying half the rent? Who helps you study? What do you rely on the person you're dating for? Is it just the person you can vent to? Is it the person that they're your token, they'll hang out with you every Friday night? Are they going to take you to prom? Relying is important because if you ask somebody to do something and they don't do it, how many times are you going to allow them to not do it? The fourth one is commitment. I ultimately look at commitment as marriage, okay? Commitment in dating is not really commitment because you're not promising anything forever. Whenever you're dating someone, you have the right to break it off, okay? Commitment, you have to decide if this is a healthy commitment or unhealthy commitment. And I think right now, the most unhealthy commitment I see in dating relationships is jealousy. And a lot of jealousy is happening because of cell phones. We can now see people wherever they are all the time. So we can see if they're with a group of people at a movie or, I mean, not during COVID, but we can, this having to stalk the person we're dating is not healthy. This having to text somebody and they don't reply within 3 minutes or 30 seconds is not healthy for your relationship. You have no trust if you expect response instantaneously. And it is something that's becoming a little bit out of control, I consider. Commitment also is a strong feeling. So what do you feel when you know that someone's committed to you? What does that feeling of commitment give you?
You feel secure.
Yep. And there's no greater feeling than security. Okay, the last one is touch. And I'll show this in a visual one too. Okay. I mean, touch is self-explanatory. It's a natural human instinct. God created men and women to have the desire to touch. And so you have to decide your parameters before you start dating. It's the same thing. Would anybody here go to the grocery store without any money? What's the purpose? It's not a place you go window shopping. You don't walk through the aisle and say, oh, when I get $5, I'm going to buy a bag of Doritos. Okay. It's the same thing. You can't think, oh, I'm just going to go on a date and then I'll think about what I'm looking for later. You have to have a plan, a list, expectations. Now I want to show you this picture. Okay, so this shows all 5 things, and they're even keel on this diagram. We have know, we have trust, we have rely, we have commit, and we have touch. In a healthy marriage, they're all pretty high. And that shows in the 50, 60. A healthy marriage is probably a little bit higher, but they're all high. They're all even, okay? That doesn't mean, like, I've been married for 20 years. I don't trust that my husband will remember that trash night is Monday. He never can remember that. But that means there's not trust in our relationship, okay? Can I rely on him for almost everything? The important things, yes. Again, is he going to remember to fill up the gas tank if we're leaving town? Maybe not. But those are soft problems. In a relationship, there are soft problems and there's hard problems. Soft problems are the day-to-day things. Oh, they forgot this, or they just did something that's annoying, okay? A hard problem is when trust is broken. So they are also trying to date somebody else, or, they're cheating on you, or they're treating you very disrespectfully, okay? In a form of emotional or physical abuse. Those are hard problems. Whenever the hard problems enter a relationship, trust is shattered. Soft problems do not necessarily break trust, but when you don't handle the soft problems, they build up, and then resentment grows, and then your relationship slowly starts to shatter, okay? The time to address the soft things, the things that bother you, is in the very beginning. Because if you can't talk about in the beginning, it's not going to become easier to talk about it later. Now look at the next diagram. This is what we consider to be a healthy dating relationship. And I know that it's not going to be flatlined, okay? You touch each other, you hug each other, you might hold hands, you might take things further. But the key to this chart is that the one to the right doesn't overpass it. So you should not trust somebody more than you know them. You should not rely on somebody more than you trust them. You should not commit to somebody more than you're relying on them. And you should not touch somebody more than you're committed to them. Okay? When things get out of this alignment, it becomes an unhealthy relationship. So if you look at this one, okay, you hardly know the person, okay, because your only communications, FaceTime or texting. You don't really rely on them yet. You're not committed to them. You're not touching them yet, because basically it's a virtual relationship that you're FaceTiming all the time, but you trust them. You're building this great trust because of how much time you're spending together on your cell phone, okay? What would you classify this relationship as?
Unhealthy.
Okay, and we consider it to be very naive. You have a naive status in your life because you build trust in a false nature, and it's not face-to-face, okay? You could set up the screen, even if you're FaceTime, do the perfect background, and you can't see the whole thing. You can't see the whole picture. You can only see on the screen what they want you to see. So no, face-to-face conversations are not the same as FaceTime. Spending time with someone, you can see their body language. You just get to know them in a way that you can't get through technology. Here's the next one. You don't know them that well, you don't trust them, you're not relying on them, you're not touching them, but you already know this is the person, like, they're the perfect person to marry. You're willing to commit to them today. Okay, this is the person that always has a significant other. I'm sure you all know that person that is always dating somebody. Like, they break up with someone on Friday, by the next Tuesday, they have somebody new in their life. Okay, this is the person that cannot be single. It's not healthy. Okay, because if you are so dependent on having a significant other in your life, you're not going to find the right person. Okay, you just keep moving on and on and on, and you're not allowing yourself to mature and grow. This relationship, we've known them for many years. We trust them, rely with them. We are very physically intimate with them, but we know we could never marry this type of person. What kind of relationship is this?
A heartbreaking one.
It is heartbreaking, and this is what we call friends with benefits. And friends with benefits never work, because exactly what, and I can't see the person that talked, but you're going to get heartbroken every single time, because it's not possible to be physically intimate without giving someone a piece of your heart. And when you give away a piece of your heart, you cannot ever get that piece of your heart back. Okay? And this was all in God's intention of a relationship. He did not intend us to hand out emotional parts of our heart to 17 people along the course to find that perfect person. Okay? He wants you to build it to be strong and healthy. It's like you hear the story all the time, built on the rock. Okay? A relationship has to be built with a strong foundation, and you're not going to build it with your clothes off. It's pretty much that simple. Okay? Here's one more. This is one where we don't know them that well. We know we shouldn't trust them. We know we're not ready to be serious with them, but we rely on them for everything, and we're basically sleeping with them. Okay? This is now what they consider to be the average high school college relationship. They know that they're not, the average age of marriage has bumped way later in life today. But the average age of taking off your clothes has way dropped drastically. This becomes a very, very dangerous situation because it's you giving a piece of who you are physically and emotionally to someone before you're ready to commit to them. And it's going to hinder relationships going forward. And so let's see. Yep. So I want you to look at that one more time. As you're building that, no takes the longest amount of time. There's no set definition, and it will change because you are going to change so much between now and the age of 25. Like right now, not a single person here could tell me what your first career will going to be. You cannot tell me where your first home is going to be. You probably can't tell me how much your first salary is going to be or anything that are huge long-term things. And so as you're developing relationship, you have to realize things in your life are going to change. And when you meet that person, they have to be willing to adapt to your life with you, and you have to adapt to theirs. So never trust somebody more than you know them. Never rely on somebody more than you can trust them. Never commit on somebody more than you rely on them. And let's not be touching people more than we're committing. So don't say yes because it's hard to say no. So this is where we come into boundaries. And I'll say this until I'm blue in the face to high school and college students. You have to have a plan. Like, I think the best time is to have a plan. And I'm going to assume every single person on this call is single. And if you are single in the next 24 hours, you need to make your list of absolutes. I do not want to be with somebody that is, and don't feel bad for creating your list because this is truth for you. Okay. And it can be the widest spectrum of things. Like for me, I don't like motorcycles, and that sounds very judgmental, but they scare the bejeebies out of me. And so I could have never married somebody that had to have a motorcycle. My brother has one. I have friends that have one, and that's fine. I'm okay with it. I will never ride on it with him, nor do I ever. I mean, I would never encourage my husband, but he would never have a motorcycle. I knew that about him when we were dating. So not that I had a specific list, but I wish I did. Okay. Other things. Could you marry an atheist? Okay. Could you marry someone? I met a young girl. She was 17. She met the man of the love of her life on Snapchat. They were together for 3 years. They had never seen each other face to face, and she was devoted in love to him. Okay. Like she was head over heels, but she was 17 at the time. He was 20, so he was 3 years older than her. So she met him when she was 14 and he was 17. And in our conversations, I said, oh, so he's 20, and in my mind I'm thinking he's in school or he's working full time. And she said, well, he took the semester off and he's living in his grandparents' basement. What do you hear? Do you hear that he's going to go back to school?
No, this is someone who's not going to go back to school or provide for her.
No. And I mean, she was like a 3.7 student. She was a National Honor Society. She had great family values in her life, but he knew how to woo her. He knew how to say everything perfect to her. But then it came to be, she knew that they were going to meet each other for the first time in the next month before I talked to her. And now all of a sudden she felt great pressure that since they've known each other and they've been in a relationship, odd relationship for 3 years, that he had high expectations for the first night that they met. And now she didn't want to meet him. And so you have to decide, what are your boundaries? What are your limits? Okay. And I heard someone say abstinence. Abstinence is God's plan for a relationship. Don't ever feel that because the world says it's archaic, that it is. It builds the strongest and healthiest relationships. If you need advice, you have to talk to a trusted adult. For some, that is their parents. For some, it's a youth director. For some, it's somebody on campus, a counselor, a teacher. You can text me. That's fine. One of the other big things in boundaries is when you start dating, you need to have low pressure dating situations. This means you stay in public. This means you don't invite them over and go to the basement with the door closed and the lights off. Okay. You go to a public place. You don't go to a movie. You can't talk during a movie. Okay. You go someplace where you can actually get to know them and talk to them. A very, very big one is you have to date someone who respects you and they share your values. And I heard someone say that in the very beginning introductions. This is beyond important. Don't ever settle for someone that does not respect you. Okay. And the reward is lifelong happiness. Okay. And I've talked to hundreds of high school students, college students. I've never met somebody that says, well, I hope that I get married and divorced 3 times and I have at least 1 or 2 kids with 3 different fathers. Okay. It's no one's goal. And it can be prevented. And it can be prevented when you build it from the beginning very healthy. Okay. So I'm going to be very realistic here. I know that boundaries have been crossed. I know that you or somebody you know has done something that they're not proud of in a relationship. You have to come back to that cross. You have to know that you are forgiven. You cannot carry that guilt or that shame or anything else. And you have to look at every relationship going forward from this time forward. Okay? Because if you're going to sit there and harbor these feelings of, I made this mistake, you're going to hinder your relationships going forward, and you'll likely settle for something that's not as good as you deserve. Okay. So again, I assume everybody on this webinar is single, which is probably not realistic, but when you are single is the time you need to set your list. What is most important to you? What are the top 3 things? And don't ever settle until you find those top 3 things. So what is the goal for dating? Well, it's the same thing of everything you see in life. What is your goal for college? What is your goal in high school? What is your goal to be on a sports team? Okay, you set a goal, you make a plan, you work to the goal, you stick to it, you reach your goal. So our ultimate goal in dating is hopefully to meet the person that we can love for the rest of our life. And if when you meet that person, your significant other, your spouse, has to be your best friend. Okay, they are the person that you go to. They are the person that loves you through your mistakes. They're the person that holds your hand or gives you a hug on a bad day. Okay. That does not happen overnight. You don't have a best friend the first day you meet them. So don't expect a dating relationship to go any faster. If you feel like after the first date you've met the love of your life and like it's your best friend, you're delusional. Okay. There are things you cannot see in somebody on the first date. I want you to think about like the first day of high school. The first impression you had of people. Are there people that you saw on the first day of high school that now you're like, yeah, not friends with them anymore? Okay. There are a lot of things in life that when you meet somebody that they have that visual impression to you, and let's be real, there's some people that walk in the room and they're the most beautiful person you've ever seen in your life. But then as you get to know them and they start talking, they become uglier and uglier and uglier. And that's what you have to realize in the knowing process. It's you will start to see someone for who they really are. So you can't rush all the other stuff in a relationship until you get to know them. Social media. It plays such a big part in your guys' culture. Snapchat, TikTok, everything else. I'm not going to say get off of them because it's not realistic. But what I do want you to do is figure out a time that it's not part of your life. You have to unwind from it, okay? It is not good for you mentally to have your phone in your pocket 24 hours a day, to hear it beep all night long. It is a constant, I have never met a youth group that doesn't argue over. So you have all these Snapchat friends, you start dating someone. Are you not allowed to individually stop other females then because you're now dating somebody? At what point does that relationship become inappropriate? Because you're exclusively with somebody else. Is it when you get married? So when you're married, can you still snap other men? You know, it's a very fine line and there's not rules out there, but it's things that you're going to have to talk about with the person you're dating. Are you jealous if I continue snapping these people? And if they are, you have to work through it. You have to talk about it.
Can I just jump in there?
Yep.
So my husband's a pastor. And he's done lots and lots of marital counseling, both pre-marriage and post-marriage. And social media is definitely one of those areas that's caused a lot of problems in marriages. Because again, these private messages, those sorts of things create a lack of trust. And then you have a breakdown of all those things that Kari's mentioned in a relationship. And so definitely you need to realize that when private conversations, private texts, private snaps, whatever the case may be, this is fodder for mistrust and fodder for broken marriages. So anyway,
especially in Snapchat, because they disappear. You can't prove what your conversation was like because nothing disappears. Okay. The only thing I want to add about social media is it is against the law to send an inappropriate picture of yourself to anybody, even to your spouse. It will always be illegal. So don't let the world or anything else tell you that, hey, we're, oh, this is the person I'm going to marry, or I'm engaged to them, or I'm married to them. It will always be illegal because you are soliciting pornography. Okay. Because pictures can be shared. And there is many students who have shared something with their boyfriend or girlfriend. They break up, and guess what? The picture now becomes viral. Never, ever, ever share a picture of yourself, and not in a swimsuit, not anything inappropriate. Okay. Because it's illegal and it's very harmful to you emotionally. I want you to realize when you flip a coin, it's 50-50 chance of heads or tails. Okay. Dating should not be 50-50. God created you with an intelligent brain, free will, choice. You can see red flags in somebody before you ever say yes to them. Okay. Don't ever think you need to date someone to experiment dating to figure out if this is the right person or not. Your well-being, your emotional state is far too great. If you already know certain things about somebody because you observed them, or you hung out with them, or your friend told you they're not a good person, you need to trust the people around you. You need to trust your instincts, because dating is not a flip of a coin of happy or not happy. So how do we say no? In our culture, this is a big thing because the world tells us we should be taking off our clothes. We can always lighten the mood by making a joke, give reasons for bad no's. Saying no should be enough. But the biggest one, it's in bold. You have to have a plan in advance where you have to know where you're going. In our world too, it's okay now to meet somebody someplace. You don't need to have them come pick up until you get to know that person. Have a friend that's going to check in on you at a certain point. You have to think about things in advance. Is the biggest thing when you're dating somebody, especially as you're going off to college. Don't be in this naive bubble that just because I'm at Concordia, that everybody there has the same values as I. And I'm not trying to discredit Concordia, but Satan works everywhere. People can make bad decisions no matter where they are. Okay. Be wise, be smart. So what are the realities of dating? Number one, just because you're dating someone doesn't mean you will marry him or her. Very true. Okay. Number two, the person you find attractive will probably change as you get older and or become more mature. So don't get so stuck into it's always been this way, it always will be this way. 3, dating does affect your future. Every relationship you get into will impact the next relationship, or impact who you are, or impacts your heart. Not everyone is dating. Don't ever let the world tell you that you're not normal because you don't have a boyfriend or you haven't had your first kiss. It is so the fact that it's not. Not everyone is doing it. Okay. Number 5, relationships are hard. Dating is hard. You only have 24 hours in your day. And if you're going to add a significant other to your day, you have to take time from something else. So you're either going to take time from your friends, you're going to take time from your schoolwork, you're going to take time from your job. You have to take time from somebody to give it to a relationship. And that's part of the thing that you have to realize, that there's no timeline. You don't have to start dating someone when you're 16 to be normal, when you're 19 to be normal. There is no normal range, okay? There's more to life than dating. Hanging out with friends is huge. That I heard someone say in the very beginning, I love people. I am an extrovert beyond extrovert. I love people. And having a blizzard today and just being stuck at home with my children all day was like crazy for me. Not my normal day. Let dating be fun. You have to do fun things, and you can do fun things for no money. You can play games. You can say, hey, mom and dad, do you want to play a game with us? Because there's no greater person in your life than your parents that should get to know the person you're dating. You don't need dating to be complete. It does not make who you are. If you do not love who you are today, nobody else can love you either. You have to love the person God created you to be. And until you get to that point that you love yourself, don't even try and putting someone in your life, because you're not going to allow them to like you for who you are. Number 9, men and women are different. There's no ifs, ands about it. In this crazy world that you can be whatever you want, it's men and women are different. They think different. They have different desires. They have different beliefs. Their heart is wrapped differently. They are just different. Okay. Dating involves time. Okay. You have to be realistic on time and what's important to you right now. Number 11, you shouldn't change who you are to be in a relationship. And you shouldn't go into a relationship thinking you can change somebody else. One of my favorite youth peeps ever was the person that was always in a relationship. But every relationship she was ever in high school was to help them, to fix them. Whether it was to help them get better grades or help them love Jesus more or get to know Jesus. I mean, she always had something she had to help. She always found the broken guy that needed someone to take care of her. And when she went off to college, it was her sophomore year. She was already 19, and her dad called me on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. He said, I'll just make a name. Betsy's coming home tomorrow, and you need to go to lunch with her because I'm going to strangle her. And I was like, okay, what's going on? I'm going to let Betsy tell you. So Betsy and I went to lunch, and she was in a relationship. And I was like, okay, so what is the problem with the relationship? Why did your dad not approve of this relationship? Betsy's 19. The person she was dating is 28. He was divorced and he had 2 children. Okay. It was a very, very hard thing for him to swallow. But he was super awesome. He could provide for her. He was mature. Granted he'd been divorced, but he had his life put together in her mind. And he needed someone to help take care of his girl. So she once again became a caretaker for him. They ended up breaking up like 6 months later because she decided she wasn't ready to be a stepmom at age 19. But you have to realize what your personality is and what your weaknesses are. Until you figure out what your weaknesses are, you're going to continue to have that become a problem in your relationships. Number 12, your parents did date once. They know something about dating. And while they didn't probably have cell phones when they were dating, the emotions of love were still the same for them. Don't be afraid to talk to your parents and ask them. 13, you deserve respect in every single level. You should never feel hurt. You should never feel betrayed. You deserve someone who loves you for you are, who's going to treat you like a king or queen. 14, relationships won't make you happy. If you're not happy today, having a boyfriend or girlfriend's not going to make you happy. Okay. You need to work through some other things. Okay. And I'm telling you, COVID has been hard on high school students. Beyond hard. You guys were not created to be isolated, to be virtual worlds of education and not have all of your activities. Do not feel like something is abnormal if you need to go talk to a professional counselor. Okay. Talk to Michelle, talk to myself. We can find a counselor in your area if you are really struggling. Number 15, your dating life prepares you for future married life. And now, again, there's no timeline and you don't have to have a certain limit. You don't have to date 22 people before you meet the man of your dreams. The first person you date could be that person. But again, when you are in a relationship, you learn. When a relationship ends, you learn. The key is that you don't want that relationship to damage your heart to an unrepairable mark. So 2 more slides. Number 1, I want you to think about this. Your faith should be every day of your life. Relationships won't be every moment of this. But imagine a man so focused on God that the only reason he looked up to see you is because he heard God say that's you. You ultimately want the person that you are going to be with to love Jesus more than you. You need someone who's going to be spiritually strong because life gives us natural disasters. Somebody in your life is going to get cancer. Somebody could get in a car accident and die. Somebody, anything else tragic could happen that you cannot control. You need to have a spiritual partner with you. And don't think, oh, they just aren't there because they're 15 right now or because they're 17. But I know that someday they will be. Until they are there, they're not worth your time. You love Jesus, and the person you need to be with needs to love Jesus just as much as you. The last slide. Marriage is a whole package, and this is the acronym for marriage. Number one, there has to be maturity in dating. Number two, every single person that's in a dating relationship has to be adaptable. Life does not always work the way we want it to work. You have to have relationship skills, which means we have to know how to trust somebody. We have to learn to rely on somebody and not take advantage. The other R is responsible. Okay, it's common sense. I know people who are grown adults and they're still not responsible. I is inner confidence. That comes back down to you have to love yourself. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to allow somebody else to love you. Anger management is the A. It's very important that people can control their frustrations. See a lot of people in abusive relationships. You can see red flags, and that's what you have to start looking for. G, being gracious is very important. Holding the door open, doing things out of love and respect and kindness. And the last one is emotionally stable. And there's 2 Bible verses I want to leave you with. 1 John 4, verse 19. We love because he first loved us. Never forget that Jesus loves you for who you are. And Ephesians 4, verse 2. With all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. Okay? Love is who God created us to be. God loves us. God created us. And he wants us to be in healthy relationships. So, what questions can I answer for you tonight?
So I have a question. This is like regarding emotional maturity. What are some telltale signs that the person that you're with is emotionally mature?
So I believe a lot of the emotions is how they handle other things. So when things out of their control go wrong and they punch a wall, okay? That's a big, maybe not punching, but having outlashes that they can't control, that's all in your emotions. Because we're all going to have things that don't go our way. So it's more looking at not necessarily how they treat you, but other things that happen in their life and how it happens. Now, a big thing that we didn't mention is somebody's family background plays a big part. And that doesn't mean you can't make a healthy relationship with someone who came from a bad scenario, but our childhood creates who we become as adults. It is what we know and who we are. And so, you guys are in a generation that over 50% of your teens today are growing up without 2 parents. So if you've never had a father in your life and you are a male, you don't know what a healthy father looks like. So again, that doesn't mean they can't become a healthy father, but it's a different learning curve that you're going to have to learn together because they've never seen it modeled, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
So Emily asks, how do you handle past guilt from previous relationships, like good, healthy coping mechanisms?
Well, number one, I think step one is praying. Okay. I think praying, I pray every single day, Lord, help me love my husband more than I did yesterday. And I've been married to him for 20 years, but I'll tell you, the devil works hard for me to get annoyed. Okay. And so for you or for anybody holding these past relationships, Lord, help me forgive myself. Help me build something stronger and help me be patient to wait for the person that's going to respect who I am. A lot of times the boundaries were passed because we didn't have expectations for ourselves. We didn't have a set line of, I'm not going to do this. Okay. And this is where you have to decide, I'm going to do this. I'm going to respect this of this person to not cross this boundary with me. And you have to talk about it. And a lot of times it's easier to talk about it before you actually start dating them. Like if you're just friends with a guy or girl and you say, well, one of the important things to me is abstinence. I'm not going to sleep with somebody when I'm dating in high school. My goal is to wait till I marry them. Well, if they don't like it, guess what? They're never going to ask you on a date. Then that pressure is gone completely. But once all of a sudden you start dating them and you've never had this conversation, expectations can be completely different. They did a study a couple of years ago of divorced people. And when they interviewed the husband and the wife on separate interviews, they both were naive to they both had different thoughts. One of them had, the person who filed for divorce already had their exit plan. They had their job. They had everything lined up for what they were going to do. The other person was completely blindsided. Okay. Another example is in America, there's a divorce rate's about 50%. 50% of marriages get divorced. Now, if you live with somebody, it's called cohabitating before marriage. If you move in with somebody and cohabitate, why would people cohabitate? Why do they move in together before they get married?
I feel like a lot of the time it's because they want to get married or they have ideas of spending a future together. Some people do it for like monetary reasons.
Yep. You'll definitely save money not having two rents. I saw testing the waters, absolutely. Like, it's a very common reason I see people say, well, I'm not sure if I can live with them, so I need to figure this out. I mean, you can come up with any reason in the sun why you can justify moving in with somebody, or you could just say, I'm not ready to get married, but I also want to be with this person forever. You can make whatever reason you want, but I'll tell you what, the divorce rate for cohabitating couples is 63%. It is higher than the average marriage for divorce. And the reason it's higher is because once you move in with somebody, the chances of breaking up drastically come down. If you get tired of somebody, you decide we need to break up, you just say it's over. In your world, you might even just send a text and say, I don't want to be with you anymore. Not the best way, but you can break up pretty easily. But when you live with somebody, breaking up means moving. Breaking up means breaking a lease. Breaking up means, I mean, in essence, if I lived with somebody and they decided to break up, they could take everything in the apartment and I couldn't do anything about it because we have no legally binding contract. I can't go after my stuff. They can take everything I own. It's the same thing. If people have children before they get married, there's no judge that's going to come and say, here's your custody. It turns into a very, very ugly battle for children. So when and this is why it was not God's plan for people to have to test the waters.
One of the questions in the chat is, when in a relationship is a good time to talk about abstinence, or should it be a no-brainer?
It's never a no-brainer in our world because I cannot find a TV show out there that does not have premarital sex in it. So to me, I think it's easier to talk about it when you're just friends, because then you'll decide if you're on the same page. If you're talking to this guy a lot and you guys get into deep, don't make it the first conversation. Hey, I'm never going to have sex before you have to, when you start having deeper conversations about what your expectations are, you can easily say to your best friend should know that you want to abstain. Okay. They should know your values and morals. If not, they're not even your closest friend. And so that person you're dating becomes your friend first. Friendship is so important. Otherwise, there's no purpose in dating somebody. You're just dating them to kiss somebody. And that's not going to gain you anything healthy going forward. So in my mind, it's a tricky line, but the earlier, the better.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And again, if you are dating someone that you've just met, because you haven't had a chance to get to know them, you're going out in those first few dates. Excuse me. When I was in high school, one of the rules my parents had is that if I was dating someone who didn't go to church, by the second date, I had to tell them that I can only date people that go to church. So please come with me. Invite them to church. That was and I thought at the time, oh man, this is such an awful rule, right? And yet that's how important it is to meet someone of the faith, right? Well, the same thing, is true of our sexuality. Having that discussion early, letting them know where you stand, prevents a whole lot of, you grow closer as you're dating, right? And if you don't have that discussion, you grow closer, and you start to move perhaps in that direction, and then suddenly you find that the other person doesn't agree with where you're moving, and then it's much harder to break up. It's much harder to say, we're not compatible. So one of the questions was, any tips for how to bring up that sort of thing without making it super awkward? How do you talk about whether or not you're going to have sex without making it awkward?
And this is harder for me because as an extrovert, I'm a pretty blunt person. And so I don't beat around the bush. And so, I mean, I think no matter what, it's going to be awkward if you let it be awkward. You know, like say the first time someone kisses you, you say, I really liked that kiss. Or, you know, if you did like it, then you already start communicating about what you like. So then it becomes easier talking about the things that your emotions. Okay. I mean, like, even, or if you're watching a show together and they're like, like, you just have to figure out what their personality is and what their background is without coming across as being too judgmental, I guess. But I would rather have someone judge you because you want to take things slow than you get yourself into an awkward situation that ends up very dangerous. Every person in this world has different expectations on relationships. And I think that our standard of a healthy relationship has really downcast. So don't make it awkward. You know, I wouldn't say my goals in life, but one of the things I was trained in was teaching sex education. And it's kind of funny is yes, it's an embarrassing topic for most people, but it's a natural part of life. And so one of my professors told me, like, when you become parents, if your three-year-old asks you what a body part is and you're embarrassed to say it, you're going to be embarrassed to tell your child everything for the rest of their life. Most questions are pretty innocent and naive when a child asks it. So when you get into a relationship, the more forthright and open you can be about it, the less awkward it will be next time. The first time might always be awkward, but only because it's not a normal thing in our culture. You know, we usually just close the blinds, turn off the lights, and let nature take its course, which is not the healthy thing to do.
I would totally agree, and just throw in there something else, and that is, you know, if you think it's going to be awkward, you know, just say it's okay to say, okay, I need to talk to you about something that that may be a little awkward. Just saying that phrase is okay. One of the things as a teacher, you know, when we're talking about not just sex education, but you know, mental and emotional health, saying I need to talk to you about a sensitive topic. I need to talk to you about something that's difficult for me to talk about. Being honest, if it's difficult for you to talk about it, being honest with someone is preferable than pretending that you're fine with it or that you have all this experience, right? Just be honest. And if you're your best friend, it should be easy to be honest with them.
And the other thing is, don't ever assume they know what you think or what you want. Unless you verbally said the words, this is my intention in a relationship, you cannot assume. There's no mind readers out there. It just is not out there. It's not realistic.
Alyssa says, one of the quotes that stands out to me is, you like because, and you love despite.
Yeah, awesome quote.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. Another person said, a friend once told me, don't settle for something lower just because you're lonely.
Yep, very, very true.
And then someone recommended PureFlix as a place for movies or films that does portray abstinence.
So I'm a planner and I need to like plan like years in advance. And so it's sometimes really hard to like live in the moment, and like when there's like a doubt in my mind that this person like isn't going to be like, I'm not sure like how we're going to get through the next year, then it's like automatic like I can't spend time with you. Even though like that problem might be far in the future. How do you deal with that?
Without knowing too much, like, I think things just have to go slower. Don't have this expectation of the person you marry is perfect, because you're not a perfect person. Like, I know I'm not perfect and my husband's not perfect. And I can guarantee if I sat down and tried to make a list of all the things that we're going to argue about in the next year, it probably wouldn't be that difficult to figure out the things we disagree on. But I want you to be very careful of not getting caught up in the drama and deciding what the values are. What is the core and what is the foundation? And if you're built on the same thing, I mean, with God, anything is possible. The other thing I really, really, really strongly encourage you is, in the very first date, you need to pray with the person. I'll tell you what, my very first date with my husband, he asked to pray before we ate, and he took me to Burger King for our first date. Like, it should have been a red flag of how cheap he was, but I didn't see it because I knew we were poor college students. But when we sat down, he said, "Can I pray before we eat?" And he prayed with me. At that moment, he became somebody so more attractive than he was beforehand. And I overlooked all of the, we're at Burger King. And I'll tell you what, when you can learn to pray with somebody, it takes the pressure off each other to become somebody else. You ask God, if this is what you want, help us work through this problem. If not, give us courage to break up. I mean, when we went through marital counseling before we got married, our pastor said, now this is going to sound really mean, but now for the next 7 months till your wedding, I will probably pray once a week. If you don't want Robbie and Kari to get married, break them up. Because I would rather have you break up now than get divorced later. And I wasn't offended by it, but I never looked at it that way. Like, oh man, like, and I always pray too, Lord, help me what you want me to see. If you don't want this in my life, change my heart. Or if you want this, change my heart. And so I know that was not a very exact, direct answer, but I would say really, really pray to not get overwhelmed by trying to predict the future, because you'll never be able to predict it. And it's no point getting hung up on things tomorrow. I mean, I can't remember where it is, but it's don't worry about tomorrow because today has its own worries. Worry about today and the moments that you have.
In addition, we have any breakup tips, especially when they make you feel at fault.
Well, if they make you feel like it's your fault, then I'm so proud that it broke up. Because anytime someone's going to point the finger and blame you, you deserved better. Okay? You can't end a relationship without feeling hurt. Even in a terrible relationship, it still hurts. The fear of starting over is a big problem with us emotionally as human beings. I mean, you can look at the stats if you guys ever get into looking at abusive relationships. Why does someone stay with someone who abuses them? Well, number one, they begin feeling it's their fault. They did something wrong and they deserve to be abused. Okay, which is not the truth at all. And the fear of starting over becomes too harmful to people. So you just have to realize that everything you do in life is potentially could hurt. I mean, do you get in a car when you start driving? Do you fear like, oh, what's going to happen if somebody hits me? Well, it's going to hurt because you're in a car accident. And so like what happens if you go into a test and you think I'm going to fail every time you take it, you're not going to do as well as you should do. You have to believe in yourself. And so, I mean, there is no easy way to break up, but you should never break up on a text message unless it's a like abusive relationship and you can't be face to face. And it's okay to say, I don't know why, but I don't think we're right for each other. You don't have to understand why. If your instincts are telling you this is not who you should be with, you don't need to justify your reasons. You can just say, I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. It's over, period. You don't owe it. How do you handle trust issues? I see that. Well, remember, trust should be slow to build. And so you have to start to understand, why do you have trust issues? Do you have trust issues because of something in your home life? Or do you have trust issues just because you doubt that you can meet somebody that will love you for who you are? You have to start to understand of why you are the way you are. And once you begin to understand who you are, then you become healthier in relationships. And so when it comes to trust, when you find the right person that's going to be your soulmate, in essence, the love of your life, trust will come naturally. And if trust doesn't come naturally, then it's probably not the right relationship for you. But again, if there's things in your past that you have to deal with, but that's what we need to do first.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and we'll close down for tonight, but you have Kari's phone number and I will send you her email address tomorrow or tonight, depending on when my computer finalizes everything. So thank you. Everyone. Yeah, have a great night.
Thanks for joining us for today's life topic. Check out whyforlife.org or email Michelle at whyforlife.org to find out how and when you can go live with us at our next Chats for Life session. Or Join us next time, right here at Why for Life Podcasts, where youth learn how to be gospel-motivated voices for life.